to create schools, to create autonomous schools, and again, charter or not, and then to be a good authorizer to hold those schools accountable. I mean, to answer the question over here, that's the job of the authorizer. The job of the authorizer is to make sure that every school is playing by the same set of rules, that no one's gaming the system around SPED or alt-ed or expelling kids, and to define the what. The how, that's what the school should be doing. But everyone needs to be following the same set of rules. So I don't know that creating more school boards is the answer. I do think that when you look at charters, each one of those is a nonprofit with its own board, and it does create opportunities for more folks in the community to get involved in schools. And I think sometimes you hear about charters being, circumventing, the democratic system. It's not, being represented by elected boards. Well, in every school that's being authorized by MNPS or district, they are represented by an elected board because they're authorized, and you give opportunities for other folks in the community to get involved in the school. So in a sense, it's hyper local because every single one of those boards of every single one of those nonprofits has 10, 15 people serving. So I think it's an opportunity for more people to get involved in the day-to-day work of school, and it doesn't limit it to 7, 9, 11 people on an elected board. So I think in short, going the Memphis route with a bunch of boards isn't necessarily the answer. I think where we're headed is a city where you've got a portfolio of options. You've got lots of autonomous schools being authorized by several different folks. And as long as every single one of those entities is doing it in a quality way, then hopefully what you end up with is more choice for parents and kids and more choices for educators.
Okay, and
Can
let's,
I
yes,
amplify one point
very
there?
quickly, and we're going to get in as many questions
Well,
as we can.
one observation about the way, and this happens across America, it happened in my school district where I live about 15 years ago. In the traditional American school system, they go in one direction. And so a new superintendent with a new board says, we're going to do this progressive curriculum, or we're going to do something. And all the schools do move in that direction. And the American democratic political response for a school board, which happen on off years and aren't partisan and have 15% of the population vote, is to run a stealth state of candidates, take over the school board, fire the superintendent, and shift the whole thing in a new direction. So in some respects, if you want an example of dysfunctional American politics, school boards will amply provide it. What the charter schools do sometimes is create lower stakes. So if you disagree about the direction the current superintendent and board majority are going in, you don't have to kick them out of office. You create a few other schools that go in an additional direction, not a different direction. So in a situation where people are creating new school districts because they couldn't take over the one they have, the alternative might be to keep the single school district, but let schools be different from each other and have that be the locus of the disagreement as over schools instead of who owns the system.
Great, thank you. Vance?
I've always struggled with my understanding of how the charter school handles this autonomy in relationship to the central office and the school board and so on, in terms of, you've mentioned finances, and obviously that's probably what keeps you a public school, is that you're publicly financed. Are there other things that flow through that umbilical cord between the district and the charter school that still have to be handled at the central office level? I think of licensing, I think of highly qualified determinants, I think of maybe benefits.
Okay. Alan?
Kind of thing.
Benefits definitely required by law to participate in the same benefit system. Licensure requirements are the same. What I think really benefits us is the joint data systems that we have and the ability for the data on students to flow back and forth. That helps in addressing the student mobility that's really high in the district as a whole. That also helps in our analyzing and also evaluating the outcomes of schools on a common basis. So there are a lot of those kind of relationships. And that said, I think our school district also has taken great steps with regard to special ed and trying to make sure that district people are involved and supportive of the decisions that are made, which are inherently ultimately district decisions, but are made based on the best interest of the students in determining placements in various schools. That, and I think discipline relationships as well when it comes time for changing of schools or placements in alternative centers. Those are areas where the district and charter schools cooperate as well. And there are others. Fred leases buses to them. Food services. We have an extensively porous relationship, which I think is positive for both sides.
Jennifer?
This is a question specifically for the gentleman in the charter schools presently. And I'm wondering, how do your charters manage problematic behavior in students? And how does that differ from how a district school does it?
Okay, so the people in the back could hear, how do the charter managers up here, the current ones, how do they manage discipline, child discipline, is that what you're talking about, differently in your schools?
Okay, I'll begin. So when we're dealing with students, let's say who have discipline issues and things like that, so the number one thing that we're trying to focus on is what is the root cause of this issue? And one thing that is kind of reinforced with the student who sees me every day when they walk in and I'm saying good morning to them, the bond that that student has with the people in that school is very, very strong. And if you have a strong bond with students who are having discipline issues, it makes it easier to really try to get to the root cause. So if the root cause is maybe a student, for this particular reason, maybe their home situation the last night was not what it should be. That student feels much more comfortable sharing that with the staff, the team at the charter school, and that allows us to really get at, okay, what are the support structures that we can put in place to help that particular student? I think that is one area that high quality charter schools really have strength around, pulling in the different resources for the student, reaching out to the parents and saying, what can we do to try to help to address these issues? Because the reoccurring discipline problems, there's a root cause to it. That's what we need to get to.
Todd?
Yeah, I would just add that I think, again, it isn't like a charter versus district thing. It's like, what do great schools do, and what do their behavior systems and culture look like? And I think great schools just have really strong cultures, and so they figured out ways to have a really tight culture with the kids and the adults. And I think one of the pieces that really helps when you have more autonomy is that you can hire and look for mission-driven people that are all on the same page, that are all willing to execute the exact same thing across the system so that the culture is really strong. I mean, I think that can be a tough thing sometimes when you don't hire everyone and some of the people are on board and some of the people aren't on board. And that's often what you see with schools that don't perform as well. But great schools can be a district school or a charter school, but they have a very clear vision of a strong culture, and everyone's on board to execute it.
Okay, another question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Michelle Walton from Cambridge High School. There was a strong reaction about the transportation issue, that if you have school choice, then the students should be able to have the bus passes go to whatever area. On our end, or on my end, are people thinking and talking about the other spectrum of students? If you're one of those students that's always moving, you start off at Gavin cluster, and now you're moving here to Antioch cluster. Are people looking at it and saying, okay, it's not good to move, you're a high school, you really need to stay, so we give you this bus pass to stay. So wherever you move in Nashville, you started off at McGavin. We need you to at least stay there that 1 year and finish so that you can earn that credit. So like you said, build those strong bonds that you said, sir, was the knowledge of that. Because what's happening on our end is we do get the students move. And I would love to tell a student, look, you're at Cambridge High School, you start here your freshman year, you're moving to the Glen Clemens area. I still want you to come here to Cambridge High School because we've connected with you, we've bonded with you. And I just want to know if people are talking about the other spectrum of that choice for transportation.
Okay, so the question is about transportation and versus what the district needs are from your perspective at Cambridge High School?
Or the students.
Absolutely. Great.
The short answer is a lot of cities in America and bigger authorizers are trying to figure out how to do that, and they totally recognize that reducing mobility, however they do it, is in the kids' interests, especially if they started in a good school.
Yeah, and other than to say, I mean, absolutely, that's a live discussion in MMPS in a variety of different angles. It's not just about charter schools, but it's one of those areas where that discussion in charters and magnets and academies of choice brings together a common interest in trying to figure out how to work that out. And it gives us an opportunity to tackle mobility instead of being, always concerned about, being held hostage to it or blaming one another for it.
All right, next question? Yes.
This is just sort of a philosophical question that I'd be interested in everyone's response to. Over history, I come from a family of many generations of educators. The concept of public school has expanded through desegregation, through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The school are a school for this type of student. And so I just wonder if you could react to the historical ideal that the school will serve everyone, every type of student community versus this sort of, that's just big box thinking, that's not meeting the needs of the child.
That's a great, I mean, that's a central issue to public education. So I'll try to keep myself brief, and maybe we can talk offline. But I mean, this is absolutely the right question. I mean, but you know, the history is not like that either. We didn't start by serving everybody in any kind of one school and then get to this point. We've added in and expanded in the rest. And when I say one size doesn't fit all, I mean, every kid's different. And any school that doesn't acknowledge that every kid's different and address every kid in a personalized way is not going to be successful with every kid anyway. And so what I think we need is a system that scales that sort of individual personalization across schools. And that may mean that a school with a STEM theme is more capable of building a tight culture that can organize around that theme and may speak to one of your children, but another of your children might be better off in a different themed school. I do think you have to be careful in talking about people's defining, these broad classifications being a basis for difference. What I'm talking about is what's the relationship between the teacher and the student, what's the culture in that building, and how does it contribute to the individual learning that happens for each individual student. And that may involve things like you want to take your kids to school by where you work versus you want those kids to go to school in your neighborhood. I just think, this is a big county. We need high quality options that meet a lot of those different needs, but we got to keep our eye on diversity, and we got to keep our eye on those big classifications that we're trying to measure from the standpoint not of saying, oh, you're one over the line, we got to move it around, or we got to make an individualized decision, but from saying there are critical masses of backgrounds and groups that need to be represented so that there can be an understanding across different groups, so that people learn to interact with one another, and so that we can be successful in building schools that are successful. And the last thing I'd say about that is, we have, in the absence of trying to do that in the public sector, we have that in the public-private sector and across counties. And so I'm working to try to go in the other direction. But I think we have to talk about that issue all the time. It's a great one.
Can I just say, to me, it's not an either or, it's a both and. I mean, I think the vision we should have is there's a great school in my neighborhood that if I want to send my kid to, I know is lights out. And if there's a school that's, on the other side of town or not my neighborhood school that for whatever reason has a program or something about that place that I want to be able to send my kid to, I can do that too. I don't think it's neither or. And I think as kids get older, right, and they figure out what they like to do and learn, that there should be more options for kids. I mean, I think, in elementary school and second, third grade, maybe that's not as important. But when you're getting up into middle and high, kids start to realize that maybe I am more STEM or more, whatever. And I think having those options, both in my neighborhood and across the city, is the vision that we need to get to. And I think the last thing I'd like to say in this, and this is may be where Alan and I differ a bit, is, since I've moved here, I mean, absolutely diversity is important, but the fact is schools reflect the neighborhood. I mean, Nashville's not a diverse city. This idea that we're living in these mixed income, mixed race neighborhoods across the city it's a great goal. It's not reality. So I think to talk about charters as segregating the population, like Art said, charters are a representation of the community. And so I think we got to be about quality. Yes, we want diversity, but I just think we got to be honest about the situation and speak honestly about race and class, which goes way beyond the power of a school, and not start to throw charters in a place where really they're not responsible for the neighborhood demographic patterns of Nashville over the last 100 years.
And if I can add one other comment, I agree totally with what Alan and Chris just said. Another point for me, especially here in a school of education, I started in the charter movement when people like Ted Sizer were involved, and so he was an academic scholar who had a philosophy about pedagogy. We haven't really talked about teaching and learning and things kids do with kids and the different approaches that they have. I think one of the things we've learned over the last 20 years in the charter movement is there's not one way to do it, and in fact there's not even one best way, but what you ought to do is do your approach really well with fidelity. And with the charter, when people talk about charters as being different and boutique, I'm like, yes. So, and it's not about picking and choosing the kids. It's about picking and choosing real pedagogy and a depth of the implementation of the work that teachers do as professionals. And so if we let a school have everybody in the building agree that they're doing what Ted Sizer wanted to do with his vision of the Coalition of Essential Schools, yes, that's boutique-y, but it's also an excellent high school. Somebody else will have a different philosophy. They'll disagree, and they'll want to do what Edie Hirsch wants to do. And that school will be different. It will be a different boutique. Both of them should serve everybody who wants to choose, and they'll probably reflect the communities they're located in. But we've lost track of this discussion, and I think it's interesting in an ed school to really not get at, well, people are exploring deeply different philosophies about how to teach and how kids learn, and we've lost that.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. We are out of time, and I did want us to end at 6 o'clock. I did want to ask the panelists for literally a last question on our way out. I appreciated Robert Gowan giving his commentary on the legislation, and the couple of you that we asked that of, the answer was yes in context about the charter authorizer and should the state have the ability to override that local decision in the context we just discussed. And so I'm going to go down the line, so you cannot say you left and did not know what everybody thought. And you can respond briefly to what Robert mentioned in his comments if you'd like. So, Alex? Is it positive for students at the end of the day for the state to be able to override based on how the bill is written?
Based on how the bill is written, yes, because it will define that the state should should implement strong practices in their authorizing. And I would say one of the reasons I think you have a high approval rate is because of the work of Chris and the recruitment he's done to bring into Tennessee some of the best and most promising operators anybody has recruited in the country. So it's that's one of the reasons why you have high approval rates here.
I mean, I think it should do more in terms of establishing a quality process and a predictable process. I would like to see more than just a supercharged appeals process. But again, I go back to my earlier answer. At the end of the day, if the decisions are made based on quality, and these are quality schools, and parents and kids choose to go to those schools, and they're loved, successful, and challenged, then that's money well spent.
Anything to add?
I mean, I agree with what's already been said. As long as the North Star is quality, and there's a structure in place, superintendents come and go, boards come and go, and there needs to be a place where quality is the North Star. And if that's what happens as a result of this bill, then I think that's a positive thing.
I would echo the same thing. The emphasis has to be on quality.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think as an operator, it's important to feel that you're going to have a fair decision process at some point, and an appeal process that's fair. And I think we already have an appeal process here, so it's more about, is it going to be a high quality process? And if the bill can improve the quality, then I think it's a good decision.
Excellent, thank you. And in our final thoughts, thank you to the League of Women Voters and to Debbie Gould in particular for her leadership in this, and I appreciate your attendance. Thank you very much for coming.